Aloha again, everyone. Jeremy Vaeni here from Hawaii. I thought I would just do the one video on Michael Jackson, but then like a cajillion people viewed it, and a whole bunch of you signed up to subscribers to my YouTube channel. So now I feel like I owe you something. So I'm going to do two more. One for tonight, which is, I guess HBO is doing part two of Leaving Neverland today, so you'll have this to listen to, I guess. And then the other one on Friday. And the one on Friday is, I think, super important, actually. Why wait till Friday then? I don't know. It seems like this should be two parts. So, I mean, they're all important, I think, to mull over and think about all three of these videos, but I think the third one is the one that's like transcendentally important in some sense, and we'll get into what all that means in the next video. But for now, let's talk about the mystique of molestation, because this is something that seems to keep coming up as the defense for wanting to believe to, at least one proven liar and another guy who kind of looks like he's lying. In fact, to that end, I thought it was funny. I got a series of text messages from a friend who was not a Michael Jackson fan, but who decided to try to watch Leaving Neverland. And he had looked into Wade Robson, or, he looked up these two guys and found, all of this stuff on Wade Robson. And so he was already a little sort of skeptical going in because of that, because anyone doing a Google search, like, say, a director who claims to have done a deep dive into the Michael Jackson case, could have come up with some facts that negate what Wade Robson is saying. Although Dan Reed, the director of Leaving Neverland, claims he did a deep dive into the case and couldn't find anything that would have negated what these two gents were saying. In either the 93 case or the 2005. I can think of two things off the top of my head, which are their own testimonies, but okay. He couldn't find anything. But my friend, who doesn't care anything about Michael Jackson, did find stuff, and so, admittedly, he was already skeptical of them going in. Nevertheless, since he's not a fan of Michael Jackson, he has no real skin in the game, so to speak. So, he told me I could read his texts if I don't mention his name. So, he wrote to me, watching Leaving Neverland, and these two dudes are totally full of blank. It's laughable how phony they are and that they are getting this sappy treatment. I know it's BS. I've read this stuff about Robson. Figured I'd watch to see what all the fuss is about. Stunned it is being taken seriously. Stories don't add up. These people are all clearly obsessed with Jackson, and this is their effed up way of being connected to him after death. I find that interesting. I mean, that's a really good observation, right? And part of my not wanting to watch the movie was also in seeing the trailer, in that they both looked like they were acting in the trailer. So I didn't. It just seemed like the trailer confirmed my suspicions, right? Now, after the movie, I guess Oprah Winfrey is doing a pre-recorded panel discussion with Dan Reed, Wade Robson, and Jimmy Safechuck in front of an audience of mainly sexual abuse victims. Oprah herself is a sexual abuse victim. So it's actually, her reasoning behind doing it is completely reprehensible to me. Let's just get this out of the way. Because someone was saying, why is she doing it? Is it for money? Like, what? Well, she's a cajillionaire. So, but of course she wants her network to get prominence and advertising, and all of that goes into it. But again, I think there's a deeper, darker problem in society now, and we'll get to that on Friday. And I think Oprah's playing right into it. But I'll just say right up front that it is reprehensible in that her reasoning, at least her conscious reasoning, is that she is capitalizing on the moment. This feels like the moment to talk about child molestation. And so it isn't about, she's taking the Dan Reed approach. It isn't about Michael Jackson. This film is about Wade Robson and Jimmy Safechuck. You can't divorce those two things. This is about Michael Jackson having done this to people. So she's saying, she's trying to have her cake and eat it too, which you can't do here, but she's trying, and saying it's not about Michael Jackson, it's about seizing the moment, and the film itself really shows how the grooming process happens and how these guys could be manipulated into even lying as adults on the witness stand, all of it. And I guess we're supposed to take away from that whether they're telling the truth or not. This film shows that. Well, no, that's actually a big part of the film. In fact, that's the whole thing, Oprah, is they have to be telling the truth. Otherwise, it's like, if you're going to prove that aliens are coming down in spaceships, we're going to interview these two known UFO hoaxers to get to the heart of what it means to have aliens land. Like, no, that doesn't add up. So it's atrocious. And to have it in front of these molestation victims who, if they are triggered by this, go into sad mode and wanting to relate and relate to themselves and all of that, then, you're going to have this, I assume, cry fest or something in the audience that is going to make people who are watching this, who either felt the same way about the movie or didn't even bother to watch the movie, they're just watching Oprah, to think Michael Jackson did this. I mean, it's just, it's an atrocity, really. It's like, how is this happening? How is this journalism? How is this? Well, we now know. It's emotive. Ting! So, okay, that's out of the way. Let's go to the mystique of molestation. And I'm going to talk about my own encounters with a child molester. I won't go into the gory details. They're not as gory as this stuff. One thing that comes up is, well, none of you are child psychologists. You can't know what it's like to be molested or what the mind is like and all that. And I can know. And I'm sure a lot of you out there know. And I'm sure some of you actually are child psychologists and know. And what you know on that level of the child psychologist is that any director can find a child psychologist to come on and say, yeah, it's possible that it could come out this way. So if you just leave out all the facts of like who Wade Robson is and what Jimmy Safechuck might be after, sure, it's possible that this could happen. If you overlook the fact that like everyone in Michael's entourage had to be in on it, security guards and, go down the list of people, it's just a whole bunch of monsters centered around this one monster. Sure, yeah, I guess it's possible. But the thing that they're not saying is that there would be signs. And someone mentioned this in the comments, actually, the last video. Like, where are the signs? Right, there would be signs. For Oprah, the sign was that she became hugely promiscuous and actually had a baby at the age of 14 that then died at birth, which is unfortunate. But that was the outcome for her. For me, now someone in the comments said, some troll was like, "You're fat, lose some weight." And I was going to make a joke about that because, shut up, troll, who cares? But it actually gets into this of like, no, let's turn it around. Let's ask, why am I fat? The reason that I am fat, the reason that I became fat, the reason I'm fat now is because who cares? I don't care. But originally, the overeating in my life happened as a direct result of my parents separating and then eventually divorcing. And shortly thereafter, within, weeks or months, my downstairs neighbor molesting me. And so that combination created a depression. My grades went the way of the dodo bird. I didn't care about school. I didn't care about really anything. And I overate for a really, really long time. And so you would think that maybe there'd be something in there for James Safechuck or Wade Robson that we could actually find, either medical records about anal rape, because they had to have seen a doctor at some point in their young child lives, or a descent into depression, a descent into madness, slipping grades, something. There would be something there. So where is it? Show it to us. But getting back to my situation, so the way that I was groomed was that there was this downstairs neighbor, and he gave all the kids toys and candy and stuff, little trinkets and things. And all the other kids, like all of them, were smart enough to think, there's something off about this guy, he's creepy. And I actually thought, I feel really bad for him because they all think there's something off about him and creepy. And here he is giving us stuff. And so I actually felt bad for him. I felt empathy. And so I befriended him. And boy, did I learn a lesson. So don't do that, kids, is the lesson. But so it was one day. It was a one-day thing. I mean, it was a bunch of grooming. It was a bunch of come into my house. Let's watch the 700 Club together. Religion. Ugh. Right? This is how they get you. I'm a good person. I'm upstanding in the community. And then one fine day, the descent into molestation. And as it was happening, I was scared out of my mind, and my mind was racing with reasons to get out of there. And finally I was like, well, I gotta go. I gotta go do dishes, or my mom's gonna be really mad. And the thing he impressed upon my little child mind was, don't tell anyone, or else, bad things will happen to us both. We'll go to jail, all this stuff. All this stuff that you're going to hear in Leaving Neverland, really, that Michael allegedly said to them. So the thing is, I kept this secret for a few months. I kept it from everybody. But then I slipped and told my friend, whose nickname was Tiger, because he had freckles and he was, a cute little tiger-looking kid. So his nickname was Tiger. So I told Tiger about this, and then he told his mom, and then his mom had a really stern discussion with me about, you have to tell your parents, or I'm going to, so you need to tell them, today. And so I promised her that I would do that. So all of this, and then I did, and then, the rest of the story happens. So this is to say that when you're a kid, and you're told not to tell anybody, even with the best intentions not to, you're a kid, so you're going to slip up most likely, right? You're going to tell someone. And if you're, say, Wade Robson, and you're best friends with, and then eventually dating Michael Jackson's niece, you might slip up and tell her something. Or if you're hanging out with all the other kids, you might be like, as either of these guys do, you might be like, hey, is this happening with you? Are you his special friend too? Just kids are kids. They can't keep secrets like that forever. It just comes out. And, even if you're trying to keep it from your parents, this is just what happens. And there's also the sense of knowing that something wrong is going on here. Now, if you're Dan Reed, or you're HBO or whoever, or whatever, I guess HBO isn't a person, but they are in a sense, because emotively there's a truth there. Anyway, if you're any of these entities, you will hide behind, we weren't in the room and we can't know what happened. We can't know what was in their minds. It's like this whole big mystery of what molestation is and what probable outcomes happen for a molestation victim. It's not that mysterious. I mean, there's no one set thing that's going to happen to a person who's molested. There's no one set reaction they're going to have to that that is going to be patterned in their lives. But I will say that hold that thought. Let me just make this point. The thing that Dan Reed goes back to is the grooming thing. These parents were groomed too, to believe. No. I mean, unless you are a terrible person and belong in jail. And maybe stage moms and dads are. I don't know. But there's no amount of grooming that can happen that can give you amnesia or make you an enabler to someone who's abusing your own child. I don't think. And I think to hide behind, we can't know because we weren't there, is, again, I said this before, but it's such a fallacy. It would be like saying, Dan Reed, with his shiny bald head and his piercing eyes and that smirk, he kind of looks a little suspicious to me. And although I can't know that he molests kids, I do know that child molesters often hide as the very protectors of children that they claim to be socially. So it's possible that Dan Reed is also a pedophile. I don't know that for a fact. Don't hold me to that. Or Oprah. Remember that time she gave away cars to everyone in her audience? You get a car, you get a car. I can't know that she had producers sneak her into the trunk of one of the cars of a family of 4, waited for them to fall asleep in their home, crept out of the trunk, and went up and molested any of their kids. I can't know that that did or didn't happen. Therefore, the emotive truth of it is like, that really hits me here, so that could have happened. This is what we're becoming? Well, we'll find out on Friday that, in fact, this is what we're becoming. Gah. So, for now, let's just say that. And also say that in my pre-teen into teen years, I was fascinated with watching documentaries on molestation, or like 2020 or 60 Minutes or whatever, like where they would talk to these kids who had horrible abuse. Like, it just becomes this, it's an obsessive thing because it's this wound, and you're looking for the Band-Aid, and what is going to fix this? Now, of course, you go to therapy and you do all of that, but still, it's there. And one thing that you learn, and that probably everybody out there has heard already, is that there is a link between being molested and becoming a child molester. And that actually gave me a little bit of sympathy for this child molester. Like, wow, what must his childhood have been that he became a monster? Was sort of my thinking on it. And I mention this because one thing I think that both of these gents claim is that in adulthood, they looked at their children and they started thinking, and I believe it's both of them, so I apologize if it's just one and not both, but that both of them thought dark thoughts about their children. They both looked at their babies and were like, I'm imagining them being molested right now. And that's what woke them up to, like, or at least Wade Robson's case is like, well, so why don't I feel that way about what happened to me with Michael, but I feel it for my kids? There's something wrong here. That doesn't happen when you become a father. And I mean, I could say it doesn't happen. It didn't happen in my case, right? Because at a young age, I started obsessing over this and found this out. I guess I could say, well, different strokes for different folks, but really, does it ring true to you, to just basic humanness, human psychology, that it would take you to become a father as a victim of child molestation to have that moment where you realize, oh, wait a minute. And so it doesn't ring true as something that just basically people do. And now here you've got these two guys with the same story, right? With the same, like, this is the whole thing, is like they've got these parallel stories. And now we're supposed to believe, because there's a mystique about molestation, that, this is how it unfolds. It's like we're just throwing out everything that we do know for this feeling of what these guys are claiming happened, which is always going to cue into our feeling of how we feel about Michael Jackson. So it always is about Michael Jackson. If you're a Michael Jackson fan, you don't want this to be true. But maybe you're willing to entertain it, or at least give it voice, but be skeptical and then make your decision. If you're a fanatic, you're going to be like, no, Michael at all costs. But if you look at his behavior and you think, well, that's weird, and therefore weird equals depravity, which so many people did, even before the molestation allegations, even before 1993. His fame worked against him. His fame didn't work for him. At a certain point, he became too weird, and that weirdness took over, tried to overshadow. The media certainly tried to make it overshadow his talents. So his fame doesn't really work for him. So however you feel about Michael Jackson going into this, I think is going to color how you feel about what you're hearing. And if you don't have a sense of like bad acting, and a lot of people don't, hence Donald Trump, hence being suckered in by bad salespeople, I mean, go down the list of things that you've ever been suckered by, or you know people who have been suckered by, that you look at and you go, wait a minute, that's an obvious fraud. How are you believing that crap? It seems as though, to me, these guys' testimony fits in with that. So anyway, let's just leave it at this. Every allegation should be heard. We all agree on that. But that doesn't mean that every allegation is true. We should all know that by now. And if somebody is an eccentric genius, that does not equate to depravity. It can, but it doesn't. It doesn't. It's not a necessary leap. And so we've got to be really careful in how we, as viewers and listeners, pay attention to these things. Are we paying attention with our prejudices up front, either as a fan who doesn't want to see a dark truth, or as a non-fan or just average person who has a prejudice against anyone who is a nonconformist? Who are we that is viewing this? Because the thing that we're viewing doesn't care about the facts. It cares about getting us wrapped up in our own emotional roller coasters, in our own sense of right and wrong, which is very often based on prejudice, based on the prejudice that we've developed throughout our lives. So that we then apply to this person. And of course, if this person is already famous, then there's already a built-in prejudice, one way or another, for better or for worse, about this person. So who are we that's watching this thing? And it really is, again, reprehensible that we would attach this mystique to sexual abuse, to be able to have this vagary of saying, well, we can't know what happened because we can't know how anyone would react. There's no baseline of facts available for how this would really go down, and so therefore, if it feels like it happened, well, it might as well have happened. If it didn't happen, well, it's good enough because the story is built in such a way that we can riff off of it and talk about molestation and how awful it is. So the person at the center of it be damned. This is not the road we want to go down, folks, is it? I don't think so. And there is a racist component to this, to be sure. Although I don't believe in the thing about, like, well, they're going after Bill Cosby and R. Kelly and Michael Jackson, therefore these two guys are also not guilty. No, that's not the way the racism works. Those guys are guilty. Those guys, or at least Bill Cosby is definitely guilty. I guess R. Kelly has to have another day in court. But if the video evidence is there, what are you going to do? But also, as I saw one YouTube commenter say, something about the testimony against R. Kelly, where the women, like, everything about their testimony, their body language, the way they're emoting, and all of this rings true. And with Jimmy Safechuck and Wade Robson, it sounds like they've made up a story and they're just going with it. This is what this one YouTuber said, and I thought that sounds about right. And also the fact that there would be, where's the slew of people coming forward? There is no slew of molestation victims coming forward as a result of this. So the racism doesn't really have to do with that. But we will get into that on Friday, what I believe is the racist aspect of this. Let's close out on this note, because people are asking, what can we do? What can we do about this? And in terms of outward action to do something about this, I would say don't petition HBO or the media. Like, they don't care. This is part of what they're trying to do, is get you upset and get other people upset and discussing this. Like, this is the emotive truth. So I would petition, like, Gavin Arvizo. Like I said before, if you're going to petition someone in a good, positive way, like, tell Gavin Arvizo, listen, your mom was a criminal and a monster. We know this. Or not a monster, but she's mentally imbalanced. And it seems she's mentally imbalanced and a criminal. We know she's a criminal. And we know that she puts you up to testifying about things that aren't true, right? This happened with the J.C. Penney case, and if you aren't familiar with that, go look it up. So why don't you redeem yourself so you can go out in public again and feel free and just admit all of this. You're a victim of your mom. You were a kid. This was not your fault. That was the victimization, and you need to step forward and say this and clear the air, and we will give you a pass as the fandom, right? I mean, if that's the worry, like there are all these rabid Michael Jackson fans, then like stop being rabid Michael Jackson fans and give this guy room to tell the truth. I would, if there's a way to email him, or I don't know if he has a Twitter account or anything like that, but if he does, if there's a way to contact him and not harass him and not be mean and not like call his house or anything stupid, then reach out and say, this is your moment to redeem yourself and topple this domino effect that these guys are trying to create. It'd be even braver if Jordy Chandler could do it. But again, I think he's wrapped up in money, and so, you know, he's living free. I don't know why, what would be in his vested interest except his conscience. And if he's been able to live this long with it, then, you know, maybe that's not an issue for him. So that is one thing that you can do. The other thing is to call your radio stations and, like, you know, you've got all these online Michael Jackson communities. Everyone pick a day, pick one song out of the Michael Jackson catalog, make it Man in the Mirror, make it symbolic. You know, one day, Man in the Mirror. And this is for everybody out there who thinks that he's guilty, to look at yourself first and why you think that. So pick a day to make Man in the Mirror the one song that you call your radio station and demand that they play all day long. Just keep calling and calling and calling and make that song go to number one again. Because already the BBC, right, has announced that they're going to stop playing Michael Jackson songs in the UK. I mean, this is ridiculous. Do we want this to happen in America? So those are a couple of ideas that you can do. You could have a Michael Jackson block party, and if people are wondering, oh, why Michael Jackson? You can explain it to them in the block party. You know, like there are things that you can do. Do they matter ultimately, given the bigger pulled back picture of what's going on? Probably not, and probably Michael Jackson doesn't care because he's dead. I mean, so you would be doing it for yourself to feel better about, which is fine. Just be clear with why you're doing it. You're not going to vindicate him, and he doesn't need it. Wherever he is, he's fine. So next Friday, let's gather around the campfire, and we'll talk about the bigger problem and what we can do inwardly about it, because this is going to be the issue, I think. But also, I mean, I guess if we're asking what can we do externally about it, this will have to do with, I know that there are people in radio who are watching this, and I thank you for watching, or at least you watched the last one and you were going to discuss it. There are talk show hosts that are watching this, and I guess it has inspired them to actually talk out on their talk shows because they weren't sure if they wanted to speak on this or not, or how they were going to approach it. So this is for you, why you need to say something and what about. So that'll be the next episode in a couple of days. All right. Everyone, thank you for paying attention. Thank you for all of your comments and all of your shares and all of that. But if you are subscribing to my channel because you're hoping I'm going to just keep going on, I just want to tell you that I think the next one is, as far as I know, is going to be the last one, or the last thing I'll say for a good long while. So I apologize up front if you're waiting for like more and more and more. There's not really much more to say. All right, take care.